Hi everybody, it's Wednesday, time for a little wisdom. So today I thought I would continue what we started last week, and I did get the book here, Toxic Legacy, How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment by Stephanie Seneff. And it's just fascinating. And this week we're going to go ahead and move forward into a little bit of nerdy science. So I hope it's not too much for you, but I think it's kind of important to understand what it is about this and the various ways that it could be affecting our health, because it is ubiquitous and we all are being affected by it in some shape, form, or fashion, whether or not we have significant issues ourselves or someone we love might have some. So I want to just hone in on the fact that in the past we've talked a lot about gut health, and we're going to kind of dial into that a little bit more today, particularly where glyphosate is concerned, and just begin to start that going down that pathway. But we've talked a lot about the fact that if you have a healthy gut, you have a healthy life. Kind of like happy wife, happy life, healthy gut, healthy life too. So as we drill down a little bit today, we'll be talking specifically about that and how this particular chemical affects the gut. And we'll just going to briefly talk about how it affects the gut bacteria and what we call our microbiome. We know that studies have been done to see if the bacteria in our gut is affected by this particular substance, glyphosate or Roundup. And it is predicted and supposed that about 54% of our microbiome or gut bacteria are susceptible to glyphosate and how it works mechanically through an enzyme pathway called the shikimate pathway. Fancy term, but it affects an enzyme in that pathway, and we'll walk through that in just a few minutes. But we rely on our gut microbiome to be able to really help defend us. And not only is it a defense, it's our Army, our Navy, our Marines, and our Air Force in terms of trying to decide for us anything that comes in, whether it's a friend or foe. And we've talked a lot about the fact that digestion is really important, and if we don't digest our proteins, that it can disrupt the microbiome. But glyphosate can disrupt the microbiome and allow for things to leak into the system as well. And as things leak in, we can have significant impact on what we call the gut-brain axis, in that this nerve that comes from the brain and then sends impulses both down and back up, called the vagus nerve, which is like a net of pathways all around our gut. When you were younger and you had a test and you had those butterflies, that is the nerve that's being affected when we get anxious, particularly and sense things in our gut. But it's now believed that many chronic illnesses, such as Alzheimer's and ALS, autism, depression, anxiety, Parkinson's, rheumatoid arthritis, and many others, really start with the gut. And as such, we know that they tend to be what we call autoimmune type, or associated with autoimmune, in that we have a disruption in the gut. Bad things leak in somehow that can disrupt the normal mechanisms of the human body. In the instance of, say, rheumatoid arthritis, these peptides can leak into the system. The body makes an antibody to them, and that antibody, in the case of, say, rheumatoid arthritis, affects the joints. If it affects the brain, then maybe we have amyloid deposition in the brain, which then increases over time our risk for Alzheimer's, and so on and so on. And there's a lot of nerdy science that goes along with that, but just to give you a little overview. But two of the main bacteria in our gut, those that we see most often in our probiotics, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter, these types and specific species of bacteria are very susceptible to glyphosate. And as such, can allow for more unfavorable bacteria that do exist in our gut, but have an oversight, so to speak, with these particular bacteria when they are not there to help oversee the overgrowth of unfortunate bacteria or bacteria that can affect our health, then we have real issues. So because glyphosate affects these types of bacteria, the lactobacillus and the bifidobacteria, we find ourselves in a lot of trouble. And we see that we have impaired digestion, we have the leaky gut, the increased risk for autoimmunity, and we see significantly more inflammatory bowel disease today. And it seems to mirror and has risen just as the increase in the use of glyphosate. And it's thought that we see a significant problem with what we call small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is not something I ever learned about until recently in the last 5-10 years, and we had never heard of this. It increases all the risks for bloating and discomfort in the gut and problems along those lines. So we know that we have gut issues that have coincided with the increased risk, increased use of glyphosate, and that can really impact our health and impact our day, just with diarrhea and bloating being so prominently part of that issue. And we think that glyphosate may play a role in that. We also know, interestingly enough, I want to talk a little about a little study that was done in Finland looking at an area of northern Finland that part of it stayed in Finland and part of it then was given back to Russia back in the 1930s. And when you compare the children in these two areas, pretty much the same climate, because Russia has not allowed industrialized farming with glyphosate, the differences in what they're seeing in the children in these areas. So what they're seeing in Finland, which is using glyphosate, 2 to 6 times increased risk of allergies, 5 to 6 times increased risk of type 1 diabetes. Now that's pretty significant, as well as other autoimmune disorders. And the researchers tried to discover what it was about these two areas and what was the difference. And the thinking was that particularly when they studied the diabetic children, they had an overgrowth of a certain type of Bacteroides, which is a different form of bacteria, in their guts. And only 10% of the Finnish children had the beneficial bifidobacterium. But the kiddos that developed this type 1 diabetes had this one organism that was an unfavorable organism that is theorized because they don't have the normal healthy bifidobacteria, allowed this particular bacteria to overgrow. And it was the lack of that which increased the pH that allowed inflammatory forming and favoring bacteria to overgrow and increase this dysbiosis. So this is, to me, just fascinating that we're able to kind of retrospectively look back at this and see the changes that have occurred and understanding. And for you and me, even without these issues, we know that glyphosate can disrupt the normal actions of our bacteria in the gut, particularly those that are involved in making a lot of our B vitamins. And these B vitamins that are made by the special bacteria in our gut enhance those B vitamins that come in from our food and allow them to be more bioavailable. And these are exceedingly important for a lot of the coenzyme workings in producing neurotransmitters, in detoxification, in producing energy. So these things can contribute to increasing fatigue, increasing depression, anxiety, a lot of the things that we are seeing more and more rampant today that are affecting our health. So this is just a small snippet of what we're seeing with the microbiome in terms of what glyphosate can do. And we're going to look further now in the next few weeks in looking at what we can begin to discover in how glyphosate affects neurotransmitter production and a lot of other chemistry actions in the body, detoxification, and how our body is not able to really get rid of a lot of unwanted chemicals and metabolites because we can't detoxify as much. So we'll be looking at that a little bit further in the next coming weeks. I know it's a little nerdy, but I think it's kind of important to really understand what it is that we are exposed to and what it might be doing to us. So until next time, you all have a great week. And next week, I'm going to be in Colorado. So we'll see where I get to record there. You all have a great week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.